Welcome to the Flynn Brothers podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea. What do we do with zoos?
We talk about our childhood trips to the Sacramento Zoo, Jimmy's recent trip to the San Diego Zoo, and debate the ethics of keeping wild creatures in captivity.
Later, John gives us a brief history of zoos before unveiling his ultimate hierarchy of must-see zoo animals.
Finally, aliens have landed on Earth. The bad news? They're abducting the Flynn brothers for their human zoo. The good news? We get to design our own exhibit.
It's all coming up. But first, here's the Solons.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Zoos. We love them, but not everybody does. Isn't that right?
I'd say that's an accurate summation.
But growing up, we went to the zoo a lot. We lived very close to the Sacramento Zoo there in Land Park, and Mom would take us quite frequently, wouldn't she?
Yeah, it was a good exercise. She'd load us up in our double stroller, and it's about a mile walk from our house to the zoo. And I think part of the reason we love zoos so much is because it's associated with so many positive childhood memories.
Wasn't there a time where she took us like a week straight every day to the zoo,
Yeah.
something like that?
I think it was actually even 8 days in a row. You know, she's a member at the zoo. I think once you pay them a lump sum and they just wave you on through, and they're like, hey, how's it going?
They bring your double stroller in.
Yeah.
It is a great place to take kids, though, the zoo. You know, whenever you go to one, you always see a lot of kids there. And they're just fascinating places. I mean, the animals themselves are fascinating. The whole notion of human beings being so high on the food chain, so even outside the food chain, that they feel comfortable keeping animals in the food chain in zoos for our own entertainment. It's very fascinating. It's an interesting blend of nature and commerce.
Yeah, I mean, that's the original justification probably for a zoo, is to people are going to pay money to see these animals we got here. You know, let's round some up. But I think, too, especially for kids, you know, kids hear about animals for the first time, and they hear about them in these stories, or maybe they'll see them on TV or in shows or in like The Lion King or something like that. But you don't really see the animals in person. And I think there is, just like seeing your favorite artist in concert or seeing your favorite athlete play their sport live, there is another level of appreciation that you gain when you see a wild animal in life.
The big argument in favor of zoos, you know, the arguments against most people are familiar with. It involves issues of, you know, keeping wild animals in captivity, ethics, etc. One of the arguments in favor of zoos is that they help with conservation, to your point. For a lot of kids, for a lot of people growing up, this is your first exposure to an animal in real life that is exotic. That's not a household pet you would see every day, like a dog or a cat. And so the theory is, as these people grow older, they become interested in animal conservation and want to work with zoos or want to work with animal shelters, stuff like that. And I suppose there's probably some research that backs that up, and, you know, personal testimonials that back that up. And even, you know, I'll talk about it later, but I went to the San Diego Zoo, and they were big on conservation, big on helping wildlife. And yeah, it's, you know, for as much as people criticize zoos, when they are operated properly, they can do wonderful things.
Yeah, I think everybody who works at a zoo loves animals and devotes themselves to caring for these animals. And, you know, oftentimes these are animals that are rescued from bad situations, or they're endangered animals, and there's a lot of other justifications for it. But you do deprive them of a certain degree of liberty, obviously.
What are some of the animals you remember enjoying from the Sacramento Zoo?
The big one that I remember was the orangutan was my favorite. They had this great sort of central spot in the zoo. I loved seeing the male orangutan has this huge double chin, like just a massive jowl, and is very chubby, like body type of one of those sitting, smiling Buddhas, but at the same time can just sort of lift one arm up into a tree and and then pull itself up into the tree by the branch. So just this fascinating combination of strength and rotundity. And then there's also the chimpanzees were incredible. They had a great exhibit. The lions.
My favorite were always the lions.
Yeah.
I always really enjoyed the lions. The difficult thing with lions and a lot of big cats is they sleep like something like 16, 20 hours a day. So they're not too active normally.
No.
So they're beautiful to look at, but for the most part, they're rather sedentary when you're at the zoo.
Yeah, but you can still sort of imagine their power, I suppose. And occasionally they'll do a little roaring for you if you're there at the right spot. I love the hippos, the flamingos, and the giraffes, which are still probably now the main attraction. I think the hippos left the Sacramento Zoo a little while ago, but the giraffes you can see from the street, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. We used to call that a free zoo when we would walk by and see the giraffes.
Free zoo. So part of the reason why I think some of these zoos are controversial or become more controversial is you establish them, in the anywhere from like the 20s to the 60s, and stuff that we originally thought was fine for keeping animals in captivity. As we evolve as our own species, we start to think that maybe these are a little bit too tight for these animals, or maybe there's too much concrete here.
Yes, my understanding with the Sacramento Zoo was that it's seen as a little bit small, and they tried to move it out to Elk Grove, or they even tried like the old Sacramento Kings Arena in Natomas, but those plans have fallen through. So I think they've done a good job of moving the animals who were larger and needed more space out of the zoo. But yes, definitely an issue. And like you said, the infrastructure is old. I mean, we have here in Los Angeles, there's the old LA Zoo, which you can go to, and it's kind of this insane, haunted, graffiti-covered place where there's all these empty zoo exhibits, and you can almost feel like the ghosts of yesterday's bears and lions and tigers, and people go and crawl through the little tunnels where the zookeepers used to go to feed the animals, and it's a very eerie, spooky, very LA hipster place.
Yeah, it feels fairly barbaric, like you're happening on a less civilized society. And I think that's mainly another issue with zoos in terms of their upkeep, is that to do them right, I feel you do need a lot of space and you need to spend a lot of money. But, at the same time, that's the price of offering dignity to these great creatures that you want to see up close.
Having a lot of space and a lot of money summarizes the San Diego Zoo, where I went this last summer. It is incredible. It's probably the greatest zoo I've ever been to. Like I said, it's absolutely massive. They have a neighboring safari park. The zoo itself is big on conservation, big on helping endangered species. I think they've even brought certain formerly extinct species back to existence, which is, I don't even know how that works. Lazarus, I suppose. But you found this interesting quote from National Geographic. You want to go ahead and read this?
Yeah. So it is the largest zoo in the United States. It's a suburban zoo that houses more than 4,000 animals, 800 different species in 0.4 square kilometers, 100 acres. Landscape immersion divides animals into their natural habitats, such as tundra with reindeer and polar bears, or bamboo forest featuring pandas. The San Diego Zoo also includes a wild animal park, which is even more expansive. It's 2,000 acres.
Yeah, so it's pretty incredible, the different terrains and different kind of climates where they help the animals adjust, and it's just very fascinating. Some anecdotal stories of going to the zoo. I'll call this the hits of the San Diego Zoo.
Please regale us.
I loved the Galapagos giant tortoises. For anyone who does not know, they are massive, massive tortoises. They can live over a century and are just incredible. I believe there were some at the Philadelphia Zoo who mated well into their 90s or hundreds and had a baby. So they're both 100 and had a baby.
You never really can tell when a tortoise is old.
No, they're they're like Tommy Lee Jones. They've been 80 forever. I saw one animal a type of crocodile called a gharial. As opposed to the big wide snouts that crocodiles have, these gharials have very narrow snouts, almost like the circumference of like a pipe or something, just very, very narrow. And I guess they like use it to catch fish and stuff. Obviously, their mouth and snout is not as big as a regular crocodile, but very, very fascinating to look at. There were African penguins, which I think are a little better to keep, in Southern California as opposed to like Arctic penguins.
Yeah.
And I got really close to them. I was about 5 feet away from them. They were just down below me. It was really incredible. They had sloth bears, half sloth, half bear, basically like small black bears, but they had kind of those sloth claws that sloths have. It was very fascinating. And then perhaps the biggest hit was the silverback gorilla. And I was quite close to the silverback gorilla, covered, by a thick pane of glass. But I got to say, being next to the silverback, it made me rethink that old 100 men versus silverback gorilla debate. We sat here on this podcast many moons ago and discussed how I think I brazenly said that 50 men would be able to take down the silverback gorilla. And I don't know that I'm wrong, but being next to that gorilla made me think the number might be closer to 100 than 50. I mean, it just the sheer might and strength. I mean, it's just pure muscle, those silverbacks.
You wouldn't have wanted to be one of those 100 men, is what you're saying.
100 gyms, it would have been a coin toss for sure. I also wanted to add, the San Diego Zoo has this beautiful thing. It's kind of like those ski lifts you see when you go skiing, but they have something called a skyfari, which lifts you up and you get to see a beautiful view of the entire zoo and safari park and surrounding San Diego area. So it's pretty cool. I'm not the biggest fan of heights, so I really faced my fears on that one. It went up into the skyfari. I rode it one way and rode it back, so I kind of did it twice,
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad that you were able to conquer it Were you able to see many animals from up there?
Not many animals from up there, but I got a lot of San Diego. I saw a lot of, people in sandals eating fish tacos.
That's all there is to see.
And army bases. But upon reflection, as I was leaving the zoo and kind of considering the nature of zoos and what I had sort of witnessed that day, I kind of come across an analogy which plays into our theme for today. And it is this: that zoo animals are sort of like celebrities. They are these individual representatives of their species who get an inordinate amount of attention. And this attention can be seen as something enviable that people are jealous of. Oh, they're so coddled. Oh, they have it so good. But then it's also seen as destructive. Oh, all that attention, all that spotlight being pointed on you. That's so terrible. And I think it sort of just brings up the larger, issue of the ethics of zoos, and I suppose the ethics of celebrity as well. But what do you think about that? Am I onto something with celebrities and zoo animals? There being sort of a connection there.
Yeah, people flock to see them. They got to get used to cameras flashing in their faces.
Yeah.
Not as much food thrown at celebrities, perhaps. You're not supposed to throw food at either of them.
No.
I think maybe they're more of a combination of an ambassador / prisoner, these animals, in that you are standing in for your entire species. Theoretically, I think the idea behind zoos is that once you've seen this panda, for instance, right in front of you, you see it eating bamboo and looking delighted, you are then more likely to contribute to conservation efforts for the panda, or at the very least, not support things that directly harm the panda's habitat. But as opposed to ambassadors who, sign up for this responsibility, these zoo animals are, sort of prisoners. They don't necessarily get to choose, and they can't be like, well, I'm done representing the species. Let's bring somebody else in here. It's like, no, you're there for life.
What? Yeah, because
usually,
if you're used to captivity, it's hard to go back out into the wild.
Oh, if you're used to steaks getting thrown at you, I mean, how are you going to catch an antelope?
How are you going to hunt? Yeah, I think it's zoos are good, especially for preserving endangered species. I think that's something where they really step up and are important parts of society. But then at the same time, you think, well, a lot of these animals have become endangered due to human activity, like habitat loss and stuff like that. So again, it's kind of double-edged sword, isn't it?
Yeah, so you can raise all the sympathy you want for these animals, but if they live in like a country like Brazil where they're cutting down a bunch of the Amazon rainforest, there's not a ton that you can do to save the Amazon rainforest. It's like, well, why are we keeping this endangered Brazilian animal in a zoo? But at the same time, where are they going to go? It's kind of just one of those things that's picked up momentum to the point where it's hard to see undoing it. And I also think that they just provide so much joy, I would say, to human beings, even though it's, sacrifice that they're making that they aren't necessarily allowed to consciously choose. I mean, if you think about the sacrifice versus like a cow or a pig that gets killed for meat, I mean, the amount of joy that these zoo animals bring to people is certainly a lot higher than that. So anyway, it is one of those classic Flynn Brother podcast ethical quandaries that we're wandering into here.
Well, let's chew over some of the questions. I guess I'll pose a few of these to you. Is it wrong to deny animals these things like, living in their natural habitat, having this experience out in the wild where they can be a true wild animal for the betterment of their species? Is this a thing where should human beings have celebrities? Should there be people we make super famous just because they entertain us and make us feel better about our own lives by comparison, or they give us something to aspire to? Do you think ethically these are good things? Are these necessary evils, sacrifices for the greater good?
I think they're inevitable. I think there's an inevitability to celebrity. I mean, you see it even in grade school or whatever. There's the popular kid in class.
The fastest kid.
Yeah, whoever gets, then they get the most attention, and then that shifts and changes as people get older, and then, you're thrown into the gigantic high school, which is American society, and certain people are given more prestige than others. With animals, I think, too, there's an inevitability about it, because I think the desire to see these animals is so high that sort of necessarily so somebody's going to do it. Somebody is going to, like, if zoos weren't an idea that have existed for hundreds of years, then somebody would be like, I just captured a bunch of animals. If you pay $30, I'll let you see them. And I'd be like, yeah, I'd like to do that.
Is your name Joe? What's his name from Tiger King? I forgot it. Another question for you is what? Yeah, what is his name? It's Joe something. Joe Exotic. Joe Exotic. There it is. I knew it was a fake name. I'll ask you this. You talk about captivity, albeit luxury captivity for a lot of these animals. Is captivity itself inherently cruel? I suppose is the question. However, I'm wondering if we are imposing human reasoning and this sort of abstract thinking upon animals, which, yes, are capable of feeling similar emotions to humans, but I don't believe there's proof that animals are capable of this sort of abstract philosophical thought. So I wonder if this is a human imposition onto the animals that, this is how I'd be feeling if I were a human. Would the animal be feeling this way? But I suppose at the same time there is evidence to... I'll just let you answer because I started answering and kept asking and kept answering. What do you think?
I think there's two sides. Obviously there was that huge Netflix documentary Blackfish about the orcas, and it seemed pretty evident that they were quite miserable in captivity, that they did not enjoy it, that their health severely suffered as a result of it. And largely that had to do, I think, with the gargantuan distances that orcas cover as a matter of their natural state. However, I follow a lot of zoo accounts on Twitter, which is just something that I do to not have as much terrible, awful things on my timeline and more just like baby animals. And for the most part, the animals seem to be doing pretty well at zoos. And it's a pretty rare experience. I feel a little bit of guilt where I'm imposing that sort of human thought construct onto animals, but for the most part, many of the animals I think seem more or less content, if not super stimulated, if not in their full grandeur of the wild. But I do think that, especially at the better zoos like the San Diego Zoo, the keepers really care for the animals and do their best to make sure that they have full lives.
Perhaps the issue then comes down to choice in that the animals are not given a choice whether to live in captivity in a zoo or to be, hustling out in the wild. And perhaps that is more where the ethical issue lies.
Yeah, I mean, you do save animals from a good amount of pain. Like maybe the heights of joy of running out on the savannah are denied to them, but they probably won't be eaten alive, which
Yeah.
is a death that befalls a lot of animals. They won't have to deal with famine or drought or any of the other myriad dangers posed by life in the wild. But you lower the ceiling, but you raise the floor of the existence.
It's perhaps like old Socrates' allegory of the cave, where if you're in the cave, like a zoo animal, enjoying your life, the shadow puppets on the wall. If you're not familiar with this, Google it, or you're not going to know what the hell I'm talking about. You then will be satisfied with it. However, you were to wonder if these animals were to see the light, would they make a different choice? I guess it just also depends on the condition of the captivity.
That's true. And another masterwork on the same plane as Plato or Socrates.
God, I really thought it was Socrates, but it might be Plato. Let me give it a look while you're talking.
Regardless, the allegory of the cave, an equivalent work, Madagascar.
Oh, right. It is Plato, by the way. So
Plato's
I
allegory of the
fell,
cave.
I have egg on my face.
In
Sorry.
Madagascar, Ben Stiller's lion wants to return to captivity. He doesn't
That's
like
right.
the wild.
That's right. Well,
Perhaps that has to be do with being sort of mentally tortured by lemurs that like to move it.
Well, you're listening to the Flynn Brothers podcast if we're trying to answer big ethical questions with references to Madagascar. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Well, it's been a few weeks, and I'd say it's time for another installment of John's Brief History. This time, you're doing the brief history of zoos. Take it away, buddy.
That's right. Well, for this brief history, I'm going to start in the present just to give people an idea of how many zoos and such there are. Have you seen the statistics here? Would you like to give a guess?
A guess of what?
How many zoos, aquariums, and related facilities there are in the entire world?
Whew. I would guess somewhere in the thousands.
There are 251.
Wow. Are these like any type of zoo or like...
These are accredited zoos.
Okay,
So
so
these are
this-
zoos that are within the Association of Zoos and Aquariums.
I see. Okay. So this can't be some rinky-dink...
No, Joe
dog-
Exotic
yeah.
is no card-carrying member of
Dog
the...
painted like a zebra. That doesn't count. All right.
That's not it. $252 million was spent on field conservation, so that's a pretty high amount of money for money spent outside of zoos. Zoos contribute more than Zoos contribute more than $22.5 billion to the U.S. economy. They support nearly 200,000 jobs, and they serve 200 million annual visitors worldwide, 183 of those in the U.S. So
Wow.
the United States is clearly the zoo capital of the world.
I would guess. I'd be curious how many of those 251 accredited zoos, I'd be curious how many of those are in the United States. I would guess the majority, if that's how much money is being, or the 183 million people out of 200 million are the annual visitors. I mean, I would assume most of those zoos are in America.
That's right. 226 of them are. Okay, so let's now go back to the earliest zoos were called menageries. They were owned by the wealthy as a way to showcase power, wealth, and prestige. They existed in all of the great ancient empires. Egypt and Mesopotamia were some of the first places
So
with
this is we're a few thousand years ago then, or
Yeah.
even further back, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're in BC.
Do you have a certain date at all? Typically with these brief histories, there are dates. We have no dates. We're just
Let's
limply flying.
Let's call it
through the
2000
past.
BC. Who knows?
Okay, all
They funded exhibitions to get these animals. So these were not just like they didn't just wander, in and like, oh, hey, put that in a pen. They went out to get them. Giraffes, elephants, bears, and dolphins. There are records of them, and they also hired handlers to care for them. China, Greece, and Rome also feature these menageries. Obviously, in Rome, these animals were used in the Colosseum. Not quite a use we have for animals today. Blood sport is not as popular.
So we're moving now into AD, is what you're saying.
Yeah, we're in AD
good.
now.
But typically with these brief histories, I know you've been out of practice for a few weeks. There's more dates usually. I'm struggling. I'm grasping at straws here in terms of the chronology.
When China and Greece and Rome
trying
happened.
to help our viewers.
All right, and then in roughly, say let's see, 1500s here, you've got Montezuma of the Aztecs.
Oh, yes.
So he was the one who owned the largest menagerie in the Western Hemisphere. But like most of the things owned by Montezuma, this was destroyed by Cortez. Modern menageries, we have Michael Jackson famously owned one that housed Bubbles after Bubbles grew up. Strange life Bubbles had, certainly. And then Pablo Escobar also had a menagerie with elephants, buffalo, and camels. And fun fact about that one is some of Pablo Escobar's hippos escaped, and they now live in the Colombian jungle.
That is a fun fact. I believe I had heard it, but for our listeners who have not, God bless you. I'll say this. Why are they called menageries? Did you get any info why they're called menageries?
I think a menagerie is like a collection.
Okay.
yeah.
It's just kind of a fancy term for zoos. Gotcha.
Yeah, well, the term zoo didn't really come into effect until the Age of Enlightenment, which is, sort of in the 1700s.
Fabulous. Now, these are dates I can grasp onto. Wonderful.
Scientists wanted to study animals more closely,
Yes.
their anatomy, biology, etc., and this is certainly easier to do when they are in captivity as opposed to constantly funding field expeditions. The first modern zoo opens in 1793 in Paris, and it's a pretty fascinating way that it happened. It was during the French Revolution, and the common people requisitioned the animals of the wealthy aristocrats, including the king and queen, took them from their menageries and put them into a public park for everyone to see. So they determined that zoo animals were, a spectacle that the public deserved to see, and it's still a popular zoo in downtown Paris today.
Wow.
However, these early zoos were fairly inhumane. Animals were packed and kept in pretty small spaces. It was more like a living museum instead of these kind of safari park ideas that we have today, or these more like grand parks where animals have habitats that fit or have enclosures that fit their habitats. Urban zoos, there's still some kind of remnants in this. You can kind of see it in like the Sacramento Zoo or any of the zoos that are more centrally located in a city. And these are often kind of in a tricky space because they're historically significant, often protected by the city. Generations of people have fond memories of attending there, but probably the enclosures aren't the most humane for animals. These are a bit more widespread in Europe, these types of zoos. There's also the suburban zoo, which is kind of more what's known in the United States, where they take up acres and acres of space, typically on the fringe of a city, which gives more space for these animals to spread out and recreate a more natural environment for them. And they also contribute to this by creating landscapes that replicate sort of where the animals come from. A step up from this is the safari park, like you mentioned, connected to the San Diego Zoo, where wild animals are essentially allowed to roam more freely, and humans are the ones who are sort of entering in these cars or buses. And they're in Fuji Safari Park in Japan. You can feed lions from the tour bus.
Oh.
And
sounds like a recipe for a bitten off hand.
Yeah, I hope they have some procedures in place. And then finally, the most widespread are these game preserves, which are essentially like national parks, areas set aside for natural wildlife. Many of them have photo safaris where you ride around in the jeeps taking photos. And then obviously there's the traditional safari, which is a legal hunt that is sponsored by the government, and you're allowed to take these animals for a pretty hefty sum, and that sort of ironically ends up funding these game preserves, that these natural spaces are preserved to allow people to hunt there. And the most famous one there, last part, is the Gondawara Game Reserve in South Africa, which features the Big Five of African game. I don't know if you took a peek here, but could you name them off the top of your head?
Lions,
Yes.
maybe giraffes.
No.
Rhinos.
Rhinos, yes.
Rhinos. Elephants.
Right.
Zebras.
No zebra.
What do we got? 3 elephants,
got
lions. Phone a friend. I'm calling my brother.
All right. Leopards
Okay.
and water buffalo are the others. They're not the largest species, but they are the most difficult to find and, when legal, to hunt.
So this is a game preserve in Africa. So this has been, even though this is where these animals exist, are these where they exist in their habitat and they've
Yes.
secluded it, basically, is the idea?
Yeah, I think they've either gotten the animals there, or they all naturally happened to, or they expanded the game preserve sufficiently to enclose all of
This
the animals.
appeals to me more. The San Diego Safari Park was interesting. It's quite a bit expensive. I feel maybe I would feel a little cheapened if I went to like a safari park in San Diego versus like a country in Africa, right? Where they're like, these are native species and they're from here and stuff. I feel like if I were to do a safari, not that it appeals to me terribly, but that's maybe I would want to go maybe to a country in Africa versus like San Diego. You know what I mean? I feel like maybe a little odd going to do it in San Diego, but I'm sure it's beautiful.
Well, the expense of it is certainly less going to the safari park, and you also get the added bonus of feeling less guilty about viewing the animals as they're given a bit more space to roam.
That's true. A space is an important part. I mean, kind of circling back to the ethics of zoos, I think, one thing we can talk about is what makes a good zoo. And I think what you just mentioned, space has to be number one. I think you need a huge amount of space for not only the enclosures and the, habitats for the animals, but also just for walking around and for interactive exhibits and little outdoor playgrounds and, little statues of frogs that kids can climb on. Like, that's when kids go to zoos, they hardly are interested in the animals. Most of them just want to go to the playgrounds and stuff.
Yeah.
But yes, I think your point about these safari parks and these game preserves and these suburban zoos, it's good to have it kind of where there's plenty of land to begin with and then plenty of land to expand as well.
Yeah, you really want to make a day of being at the zoo, and sort of going along with that, you got to have shade at a zoo. You got to have big trees, which is kind of, I think, part of the difficulty of creating a new zoo, or why so many of these old zoos are beloved, because oftentimes they've been there for generations, and so big, large, leafy trees have grown up. So you want stuff not only for yourself but for others, and it has to smell good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, speaking of trees, a lot of zoos will have eucalyptus trees, so those are good. Those are musts, right? If you're gonna plant trees, they got to be eucalyptus.
Absolute must. I think the eucalyptus too is maybe the best tree in the world at camouflaging the scent of animal dung.
Right.
Would you say?
Right, I would say so. I don't know many rosemary bushes. Maybe they should be rosemary
maybe some
bushes.
rosemary bushes.
But then you got bees out the wazoo at the zoo. You don't
Can't
want
have that. Can't have that. The
I think
other
too.
animals would see them being free.
Yeah, that's true. You would want, in addition to the trees, just lots of foliage, just lots of plants and shrubs and bushes. It should feel like you are somewhat in the wild, right?
Yeah.
There should be concrete, there should be paths with little painted paw prints so you know which way to go. but for the most part, there should be a lot of greenery.
Yeah, not only in the zoo, but also in the habitats when you can. If these animals are animals that are used to living in lush environs, you want to see nice green hills, nice trees in their exhibits. You want it to seem like that'd be not a bad place to spend your days.
In terms of the exhibits, you want a lot of animals, a lot of different types of animals. But I think a must is you got to have those baby animals.
Yeah.
Those baby animals are the ones getting the people through the gate, you know? So when there's a new baby pygmy hippo, there's a new baby panda, there's a new baby tiger, that's what you can advertise. That's what you can market. That's what gets those 200 million people a year in through the gate.
I think you turned into Joe Exotic there for a second.
Yeah,
that
I
was,
did. Sorry
that was what
about
got
that.
him into trouble, all the baby animals. But you're not wrong. And I think, too, that something about the animals at a zoo, I think it can maybe make you a little melancholy. But then there's also the, like, well, you know, at least these creatures get to reproduce and have a family
That's
of
true,
sorts here.
yes,
And
that's
certainly
true.
that must enrich their lives in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're at the zoo alone, you know.
Right.
Just that they're alone. What am I doing here alone? This tiger's got a family, you know, and all this.
Makes the visitors melancholy, you're saying.
Yeah, I
And
suppose.
also, I think a bit less of a stressful environment. I mean, I can't imagine
Yes.
anything more stressful than being a wild animal raising your wild young out in the wild
That'd
with
be, yes.
wild predators about trying to pick it up. I mean, because that's who they go for, the
Yeah.
predators. If you've ever seen a nature program, they go for the weak, they go for the young, the sick,
Right.
the old.
Harder than raising a kid in this economy? Who knows? I think last thing, too, with a good zoo is there's always lots of available information, right? They have little audio tours where you can listen to, you know, information about conservation efforts. You can talk to the zoo docents. What is that word, docent? At zoos, at museums, there are docents. Everywhere else, there are not. A docent, I guess, is an usher, is
Yeah.
someone there to provide information. What is that word, docent? It's
it's-
only ever in that context.
It's basically in between an usher and a professor.
I'm a
Like
docent,
you're
yeah.
an expert because you've been given a pamphlet that you have studied, but there is no
Right,
degree
right.
that you have.
You're a
You-
docent.
Yeah, you don't need a degree.
But yeah, I think that's huge at a good zoo is all the readily available information.
yeah, you don't want to go to a zoo and be like, "Hey, why is that animal doing that?" And the docent's like, "Hey, you got me.
You got me. This is my
I think
first
it's
day."
weird."
Yeah, I didn't even read the pamphlet I was supposed to study. And I think, you know, conversely, just to put a button on this, a bad zoo lacks all the things we just mentioned. Okay, bad zoos are tight, they're cramped, they you know
They're
have
hot,
they're
no
hot,
shade.
bunch of concrete, no babies, and they don't have any information. That's the bad zoo, right? That's
Yeah,
the bad zoo.
That's the bad zoo.
All right, we're gonna step away. We'll be right back. You know, you mentioned Blackfish earlier and the Netflix documentary, and it got me thinking there are these, for lack of a better term, zoo shows, a couple of which have come out in the past few years that I want to talk about, that sort of deal with the human-animal relationship. And
Typically bad zoo shows.
yes,
like-
bad zoo shows. Yes, we need a qualifier
Yeah.
on there. But the two shows that came out, I believe they were from the same production team, were Tiger King, of course, which came out in 2020, and then a year or two ago, Chimp Crazy came out. And, you know, both these shows are built around these crazy main characters, right? Tiger King was built around Joe Exotic, you know, this guy who liked playing country songs and feeding tigers old Walmart lunch meat. And Chimp Crazy is built around this woman, Tanya, who is obsessed with chimps, who, you know, keeps them in her basement, feeds them, you know, McDonald's and Coca-Cola. And both these characters were just so fascinating because they profess to, and I believe in a way, really loved these animals.
Yeah.
But they were doing it in such an unhealthy way. They didn't know how to love them properly or love them in a way that was beneficial to the animal. What do you think these shows communicate about the relationship between humans and animals?
Well, that just, you can't, there's a line, beyond this line you do not cross. And
To quote Walter
Walter,
from The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, I think that's the big issue with both of them is they just get too wrapped up in these animals and treating them as though they're human friends or sort of humanish in a way. And I think partly that one of the big, like, whoa, what is going on here? What you mentioned is like feeding them processed human food.
Yes,
Just for whatever
yes.
reason, it's so wrong.
It's so wrong.
unnatural.
So wrong. Yeah.
And I think just the shows were interesting because they were, sort of similar shows, basically took the same approach, but they were very different in that Joe, I think, loved the tigers, but he was very cynical about his usage of them. He keeps them as babies and he makes a ton of money and gets a ton of prestige off of that. But then they grow older and he's keeping them in pretty big cage, like throwing like 15 tigers into one cage and just not really treating them very well. And also not really, trying to live with them too much on a daily basis. Kind of kept them somewhat at a arm's distance.
Yeah, I think you brought up the correct phrase. He used them.
Yes.
He used them.
Whereas Tanya, I felt genuinely had this weird, twisted love for the chimps that was not very cynical in that she was trying to profit off of them, just that she got her rocks off keeping these obviously intelligent and powerful creatures in this very cruel captivity that for whatever reason she was blinded to its cruelness.
And then the very ironic ending of Chimp Crazy, to spoil it for those who have not seen it, she's talking about how docile chimps are, and throughout the documentary you've seen instances where chimps kept in captivity have kind of flipped out and attacked their human captors. And it happens to her at the end. She is attacked by one of the chimps just because she has not been taking proper care of it. And yeah, it's just like this woman, sure, she loves him, but she's going to love him till she lets him kill her. And there's this just really tragic human element to these shows where these people are capable of love and want to love, but they just don't do it properly. And I think that is just such a tragic element of these shows.
Yes, I think that both of these characters are tragic heroes in a way. They have Joe Exotic, too, as messed up as he is, certainly has that uniquely American charisma that gets you to root for him, whereas Tanya's more like a serial killer. Like, just there's this vacantness behind her eyes where you're just like, God, you really don't see why what you're doing is so wrong. But yeah, I think Grizzly Man also sort of makes this point, just that you can't live side by side these animals. They're especially they're wild creatures, and things can be fine for even years at a time, and then one thing sets off the wild animal in them, and then you're just meat.
I think we've mentioned the film before, Werner Herzog's documentary Grizzly Man, about a man who went to, I believe, Alaska for 20 years and would live among the grizzly bears until one winter they couldn't find much food and decided to eat them. And there is a line across this line you do not right there just exists between humans and animals. I tasked you with something that you're going to share here in a sec. I'll just preview it. I had you rank the best zoo animals, and I had you name the categories. And I want listeners to think of this almost like you're in a museum, right? So as you're ranking these best zoo animals, when you go to a museum, you're usually going for the Van Goghs. You're going for the Picassos. You're not really going for the pottery and then the old ceramics, right? So kind of you'll sort of start, to continue the analogy, you'll be sort of starting with animals in the ceramics and pottery category, and then you'll sort of work your way up to the Picassos, Van Goghs. Is that right?
That's right. So what I've got here is, this is my first category, is only if I'm here all day and I already saw everything else. So this is my first category. Most of the birds.
Yeah.
Most birds I'm not too interested. A cockatoo or a toucan, can hold some interest. Flightless birds, I could say, maybe are an exception to this rule. I'd see an ostrich. I'd see an emu. They're over 6 feet tall. Very impressive. But, I see a lot of birds in my day-to-day life. Birds are birds to me. And, birds deserve to fly. It's even more cruel, I think, to keep them in captivity than any other animal.
Yes, I agree. What about, though, flamingos are birds, are they not?
That's true. Flamingos can be quite striking on account of their pink feathers due to the high intake of shrimp in their diet.
And yet they don't have gout.
You got to take some flamingo DNA. Maybe that's what's in allopurinol.
Maybe.
And they're good. They're bigger, so I like that. They're standing on one leg. Also interesting. And then penguins. Penguins to me, you were 5 feet away from a penguin, which is pretty cool. But penguins to me can be a little bit overrated. They're extremely stinky.
Yes, particularly the Arctic ones if they're housed indoors. And,
right.
And,
they're not used to warm air interacting with their feces. Okay. Here's where the next category is. I'll stop if I'm on my way somewhere else. And these are the 4-legged grazers. So you're sort of like maybe your antelope, your ibex. If it looks like a deer, I'm not that interested.
You've seen deers.
You've
seen deers.
They're just out there chewing grass. It's not that big of a deal to me. Exception being the zebra, obviously, the pattern there, and also its fame, as well as any animal that has one of those sort of ice age snouts. You know what I mean? Where it sort of looks like an elephant trunk.
Yes.
Two large nostrils.
Something I learned about zebras is similar to human fingerprints. No set of zebra stripes are the same on any animal. They're all distinct. Very interesting.
Do you know why they have their distinctive pattern?
It has to do somewhat with camouflage. Is that correct?
My theory, or not my theory, Jesus.
You invented this.
Is that it's to disguise their numbers and to make it difficult to pick out an individual zebra to go after. Because if they're all stampeding around, how do you pick one when they're all just black and white lines? Here's my next category. If it's hot out, I'm poking my head in for the AC. This is the reptile house.
Yes.
They're pretty stagnant / hard to find.
A lot of them are like every other exhibit in a reptile room will usually be like closed for maintenance too, and it's just like, what's the deal? Where's the frog?
Yeah,
where's the toad?
Where's the skink?
Right,
exactly.
Right.
No, I
gotta be careful how you pronounce that.
Yeah, I think I skirted it. And then there it's the snakes. Maybe I also feel bad. Their enclosures are kind of small. Maybe you see some spiders, some other creepy crawlies. They're not reptiles. They don't do too much for me. Exception being the crocodile, the alligator, a Gila monster. I also like one of those.
I really actually did enjoy the reptile house at the San Diego Zoo. The snakes were moving around, like crawling up the glass, and it was pretty sweet.
Nice.
Seeing their musculature as they shift their body along, it is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, no.
But I agree with you. Not the star exhibit.
No. Now we're getting to the ones. These are the ones that I'm circling when I first come in the zoo. I get the pamphlet.
The map.
Yeah. This is my next one is cute little rascals. And these are the red panda, otter, meerkat, lemur, small monkeys, koala, capybara, kangaroo.
Nice. Yes, I agree with you. I think kids tend to enjoy these. They are the cuddly menace. They subscribe to that trope we invented.
Yes.
And yeah, they are always fun. They particularly the meerkats, I always really enjoy them, and they're always usually very active.
They're up to something. Who knows what they're up to? Yeah. Otters, I like seeing them. They're often quite active. And the red pandas, I think, are probably the epitome of the cute little rascals. They're just adorable. I can't believe they even exist.
Yeah.
Next up, these are complete opposite. The big cats. The big cats. I'm stopping by for any of them. I want to see them all. The lion, the tiger, the leopard, all types of leopard. The puma, the mountain lion. There's all of those different.
Yes.
It's all the same animal.
Yeah.
The cheetah. Problem is, and you mentioned this earlier, they're not terribly active usually. Most of the time, they're kind of taking a snooze. But you can see them in there. And these ones, I also feel probably the most sympathy for because they are so powerful, so magisterial out in the wild. They rule these jungles, these savannas, and yet they are reduced to having meat tossed to them as opposed to
Yes.
hunting for it on their own. And so-
Costco ground beef slapped into the dirt in front of them.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the big cats. I do think in concept they're a little better than in execution. I think you have these grand visions when you go to the zoo of a tiger roaring up at the heavens, and you go and they're just usually taking a nap in the shade. So they are very cool to see if you catch a good glimpse of them. But yeah, sometimes can be slightly overrated.
Yes. The next one are the big herbivores. Herbivores? Herbivores.
I usually do a silent H, herbivores.
The big herbivores. I love the giraffes, the elephants, the rhinos, and the hippos. These are majestic, beautiful, huge creatures. All of them have cute babies. You know,
Yes.
I'd be hard pressed to put one above the other. If I were to do
hippo.
a flash ranking right now, I'm going hippo, elephant, rhino, giraffe.
Wow, giraffe baby last.
Giraffe baby last.
I should have mentioned our producer Will Slade also went to the San Diego Zoo this summer, and we both saw the baby giraffe, and pretty cute, wasn't it? Yes, he's nodding to me, giving me the thumbs up, or what is that when you do the ring and the three fingers?
A-OK. The Italian, yes.
Yeah, the Italian.
The Italian, it's kind of like a very nice.
Yeah, well, that's Borat.
That's
but
Borat.
yeah.
The Italians and Borat, there's some overlap. I don't feel so bad for these ones as I do for the big cats. Yes, they are used to obviously much larger ranges. These are all animals that walk a pretty considerable amount, but they are free from the threat of being eaten alive. And,
Yes, true,
Thus
true.
get to focus sort of on raising these cute little babies, which I like.
If only we were all so lucky we didn't have to be afraid of getting eaten alive day in and day out.
Right. Though thankfully we are humans, and that is certainly, and it's not a 0% chance, but it's certainly a lot lower.
It's on my mind a lot. Anyway, next category.
Then we have ape brothers. I really do love seeing the apes at the zoo. A personal fascination of mine is of the evolutionary history of humanity, and obviously we go through the apes, and there are some proto-humans that are in between us, and chimps, bonobos, orangutans, and gorillas.
When you say ape brothers, are these monkeys, are they brothers with each other, brothers to humans? How do
All
you
of
use?
us. We're all primates.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how you meant it.
You know, I was firing from the hip here. I felt
Yeah,
ape brothers felt right. I think they're the most fascinating creatures at the zoo. Obviously, they are the most intelligent, and I could just really watch them and their social dynamics for hours.
Yes.
I think that pretty much anything that they're doing is really fascinating. There is some guilt, certainly, because it's darn near, it's as close as you get to keeping a human in these same conditions. But they are just beautiful and fascinating to behold, and I think have really given me a deeper appreciation for these animals than I ever could have gotten from just a nature documentary.
You know, if you had told me before that you'd have these herbivores, the giraffes, hippos, etc., and then the chimps and gorillas ranked above the big cats, I would have been kind of surprised. But now that you sort of explain it, and you're talking about bang for your buck, what's really giving you the best entertainment at the zoo, I think you got it right here. I like how you've structured this. These ape brothers, these are the Van Goghs, is that right? These are
Yes.
the Picassos.
To me, I like that. That's my favorite thing to see. The strength, agility, and mobility of these creatures never fail to astound me. I mean, you saw the gorilla up close, and it's just truly a sight behold. And you can also really feel something deep and strange, and this is probably the heroin to which Tanya was addicted. But if you are ever able to make eye contact with them in a way that doesn't threaten them, it is something rather remarkable to look into the eyes of an ape brother.
Chimps, something like 93-94% same DNA as humans, right?
I think it's even higher. I think it's
higher?
like 98.
It's unbelievable,
Yeah.
isn't it? Well, do you have a favorite animal?
I do.
You got a last category here?
Yes.
What do you got?
This is the best animal at the zoo because they are cute, they are exotic, They are lovable, and they are the only animals that I think actually prefer to live in a zoo, and that is the giant panda.
Ah, wonderful. Yes, I think most people would agree with this. The pandas are the only exhibit at the San Diego Zoo where there is a giant line for them.
Yes, and there's very little guilt. I mean, pandas basically just sit in bamboo forests all the time. They're not roaming around much, and they seem to be so inept at procreating that they need the assistance of humans to keep going. So they almost belong in zoos. Every no more wild pandas.
Oh, wait
Every
a minute,
panda
wait
in
a
zoo.
minute, wait
No,
a minute.
no.
Wait
But
a
yeah, I never feel bad looking at them, and I feel real good because they're cute and they're typically chewing. One time I saw a panda sitting in a wheelbarrow full of bamboo and eating it as it was being misted by a fan, and I was
Boy.
like, I can't imagine that panda could be any happier.
So pandas, they're sort of the Sistine Chapel of zoos. You're saying they keep doing these
the Mona
museums.
Lisa.
The Mona
They're
Lisa.
the
Mona
You know,
Lisa.
there's a bit of a line, but it's worth it.
I will say this. I think I agree with you. I will say the hype can sometimes exceed the reality where, again, the panda's not doing much. It's just sitting on its ass eating the bamboo, right? It's not exactly the most lively show they're putting on, but there is a certain elegance to the simplicity of them and how little they do. And, when you see one, I have to admit it is pretty incredible. It's incredible to live in Southern California and get to see a panda. That's just no reason where we are in the world we should ever see one of those.
Yeah, that's perhaps another argument against zoos, that there's just this high unnaturality of them, but at the same time you get to behold the wonders of creation, and truly a panda bear, you're just like, how is that actually real? Like, that's the main thought that I have looking at a panda, and that's why they're at my top spot.
A final melancholy note to end this on before we go to break. I remember when we finished watching the bizarre experience that was Tiger King, and we were just in shock, and we were trying to discuss, what do you make of all this, the ethics of this, of Joe Exotic, of what he did, and like, how do you, what message do you come away with? And I remember you took a deep breath, you were kind of pensively looking out the window, and you just said, there shouldn't be tigers in North America.
Yeah, it is something that I agree with, and at the same time, I would like zoos to exist as well. I'm a man of contradictions, just like Joe Exotic.
Just like zoos, just like everyone else. All right, final break. When we come back, perhaps our craziest game yet. All right, I'm going to lay out some circumstances for our game. Would you mind providing me with some sound effects?
Sure.
All right. Aliens have landed on Earth, and they've come up to the Flynn brothers,
Meeple Barker.
and they tell us they're going to abduct us for their human zoo on their home planet. So they throw us into their spaceship and zoom back to their home planet.
To add on to this,
Hey, you're not talking. You're doing sound effects. Sorry, go ahead.
To add on to this, for the justification of it, we can't fight this because the aliens tell us we need to show you guys off to our species so that we don't eradicate your planet. If you don't come with us, everyone on the planet's gone.
And we're still a little nervous. And they say in their alien language, beep, burr, 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 but we have an alien to human translator, and it translates to, we'll even let you design your own exhibit. And we say, all right, let's go to your home planet.
We must.
So today, we didn't come up with a name for this game. It was kind of impossible.
Design your exhibit.
I was thinking build a zoo workshop, like build a bear. I couldn't figure it out, though.
What was the Ty Pennington show?
Extreme Makeover Home Edition.
Extreme Exhibit. Creation, Extreme home makeover zoo edition.
Yeah.
Human zoo edition. It's not.
It doesn't
it
roll off
doesn't
the
roll
tongue.
the
Anyway, folks, we're going to be designing our exhibit at the human zoo that we're in on this alien planet. Let's just stop explaining it and let's just get into it.
Okay.
Your human zoo exhibit. What's it like?
I was thinking the main thing. Obviously, you have a bed, you have comfortable things to sit in, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
We're talking about amenities here. I would want at least a half-court basketball hoop.
I figured you would put that. You know, I was almost wondering if there would be with some of the exhibits at the San Diego Zoo, they had a little tunnel between two exhibits so the animals could go into two exhibits and like go back and forth and like explore different habitats and stuff.
Like that.
I wonder if you and I could even have sort of this shared third exhibit where we each have our own exhibit, like you said, bed and our own sort of personal space. And we have this shared exhibit where we can socialize and have, play one-on-one basketball. Maybe we could have, like a pool table, some board games, a little
like
putting green.
Yeah.
We really want to get out there. These aliens, limitless funds, throw a go-kart track in there. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I wonder if they would limit us in terms of vehicles that could be leveraged for escape, but I'm with you on it. I think certainly there would be, I like this. There's two, we have our own sort of separate exhibit and then a communal exhibit, and we can visit each other's exhibits.
That's pretty good.
Okay, I would say another thing that would need to be in there is a pool of some sort. I would just need to see water, also good exercise.
I had this as well. I think you have to embrace being in a zoo. You have to want to entertain the aliens that are coming to see you. So I think a pool affords good opportunities for jackknives, for cannonballs, for belly flops, for these sorts of things. Like I say, you got to embrace being in a zoo.
That's great.
In addition to the pool, I think a little beach, sandy little area, whether it's kind of a faux beach with a pool and some sand, they could even paint like a backdrop of a sunset just to give us, sort of the feel of, oh, you're at the beach, or, make the pool a little more spruced up,
Or a perpetual sunset. I like that. I would also like a massage chair. I feel like I'm gonna be, I'm gonna be getting tight in the exhibit.
Doing jackknives
and stuff like that. I think that's just that's a solid 15 minutes in the morning and the afternoon that you can go ahead and knock out right there.
I think a lot of what we'd be doing is sitting on a couch or massage chair watching TV. That's the equivalent of what a lot of animals are doing at the zoo. They're just hanging out. They're doing what you'd do if you were just hanging out and had some free time.
Yeah.
This brings up another issue. When I was considering what I would be wearing in the human zoo exhibit, of course, my mind immediately went to, well, all animals are nude in their exhibit. Wouldn't you then be nude? But that is not really the state of most humans as they operate.
No.
You'd be in the state of that which you are comfortable in at home. So for me, that's T-shirt boxers. I'd basically be in the morning when the first aliens are showing up at the zoo. The members get to go in an hour early like Costco.
Sure.
I'm, a cup of coffee, T-shirt, boxers. I'm flipping through Sports Center. That's sort of what you're getting at the beginning of the day.
See, that was something that I was wondering about. Did we still have internet access to Earth? And the other question is, would you still want to be keeping up with Earth, or would it hurt you so much to know that everything is still going on? People on Earth are totally ignorant of the sacrifice that you've made for them.
Well, I'd probably.
Or do they know you?
I'd imagine we didn't hammer this out at a time. I'd feel like this is sort of a 3-year contract and then they let us go. Or are we there for life?
Oh, I think it's the zoo deal. I think you're in there for
you're
life.
in there. Once you're in a zoo, you never get out. Well, it could be true. Yes, in that case, maybe you wouldn't want to keep up on tabs. Maybe I'd just use it to watch old movies then.
Sure.
That'd be okay.
That was what I was thinking. It's sort of like a library. I'd like movies. I'd like books. You'd eventually, you'd start running out of them, certainly. The other thing that I was thinking of a big time, way to pass your duration inside of your exhibit would be, are you being fed like zoo animals?
Yes, I was wondering that as
Are we
well.
allowed to make our own meals? I would say that because aliens would have just absolutely zero idea as to how human food would go together.
Right.
They'd be feeding us like ground beef covered in peanut butter, raw ground beef and peanut
Right.
butter. So maybe they would let us cook, in which case my life would more or less revolve around making huge meals
Ah.
and exercise.
Yes, that's interesting. My thought was these aliens have limitless resources. For God's sakes, they can travel at light speeds. So I would figure they would have the capabilities of making me whatever I want, and thus I would be doing what I would do if I could have whatever I want. I had a private chef, I'd be doing chicken parm, I'd be doing mac and cheese, lasagna,
Right.
fried chicken,
Yeah.
sushi. I'd be going nuts.
Well, that would necessitate having the pool.
Well, here's the thing, is I think they would put the kibosh on me getting to choose my own meals, and that's when I would start getting the raw celery and the lean ground chicken
That's true.
thrown onto the ground.
That is true, because at the zoo, what happens is the keepers study the diets
Right,
of the
right.
animal, and they give you just what the animal needs to survive. If they're
Yes.
getting a little big, they start putting them on a diet.
Yes,
You'd
and
be pounding the glass, give me chicken parm. give me
you
mac
wonder
and
how
cheese.
long you'd be in the human zoo before you started flinging your own crap at the aliens and,
But then you'd-
losing your mind. You know?
You'd have to live among your own crap, or unless there's some alien coming in and hosing it off
it down.
the plexiglass.
Another thing I want in my human zoo exhibit, I would like a sort of jungle gym / ball pit situation like you would have at a Chuck E. Cheese. I would also like a trampoline. Again, I am leaning into the fact that I am an entertainer. These
Right.
aliens have come to watch me. So I'd like to, bounce on the trampoline, do some pull-ups on the jungle gym, and, I don't know what I would do in the ball pit. Just more jackknives, probably.
Yeah. Popping out, laying dormant for a while and then
Scaring
popping
'em.
out to scare people.
Yeah.
I think that's good. I do say it would be nice to be sort of, if you are kept in captivity in the zoo, you wouldn't have to worry about things like ambition, nagging at you.
no.
You would know that you'd done a great deed, that you'd saved
Yes.
humanity from extinction, and all you have to do is continue being the zoo animal that you are. The other thing, though, zoos as well, what they do obviously is they provide mates for the
Yes, I was wondering this as well.
I was also
wondering this as well.
because again, the
yes.
aliens aren't going to know any different. They would probably just throw in some person who they have no idea what an attractive human woman looks like. They can't hear
right.
the difference between our languages.
Right.
It is rather wild that we do that to animals. Now that I think
Yes,
about it.
I think they would. That's why I thought it would be more of an interim basis. This human zoo exhibit, it wouldn't be a life sentence.
Yeah.
we wouldn't necessitate a mate. It'd be like kind of a 5-year sort of 3 to 5 years sort of. Hey, we're gonna show you off. Let everyone on the planet get a look at you. It should take 5 years. We only have 7 trillion beings on this planet. It's a very small number, and I'm like, yeah, small,
yeah.
right? And but yeah, the funny thing about this exercise is this whole podcast we've been asking if an animal had been given the choice between captivity in the gilded cage of a zoo or living in the wild, scrapping, hustling, what would they choose? And what's interesting is I love my life, you love your life, but this human zoo, I mean, I could see doing it, I wouldn't love it, but it's like,
It was for the sake of humanity.
for the sake of humanity and preserving humanity, you got to make some sacrifices.
You'd put yourself on display with the aliens. Obviously, you would bring along Lauren. If
Oh,
she
of
would,
course,
she
yes,
would go
yes.
for
Oh,
it.
I'd try to bring some friends if possible, but look, I mean,
Hey,
it's-
check out my place.
Yeah,
I got a good
but,
place.
but,
Well, one catch.
yes. There's going to be trillions of aliens looking at us.
Would you mind having aliens looking at you? I feel like the only animal that I care about their opinion of me is other humans.
Yes, I wouldn't mind. I mean, it depends how grotesque they are.
Yeah.
Again, that is
What if they're making motions like big belly motions?
like fat
yeah.
man in there. Like that is where I think I would start to lose it if they were calling me fat or they were gawking at me. I think that's when I'd start flinging my own crap and going crazy at them.
You're really wrapped up, I think, in the way that these aliens are perceiving you. You're saying you're leaning into being an entertainer, but then you're also
Well-
driven mad by the eyes on you.
The beauty of the zoo is it's part of why you go to a zoo is it's like with live theater, there's that element of risk. There's the element of the gorilla could just come charging at the glass and bang on the glass, or the tiger, a bird could fly in and the tiger could just attack it. And like there's that element of risk, okay? So things don't always, it's not always just a docile animal or a docile human, eating chicken parm in a massage chair. Sometimes they're going crazy at you, right? So you want that element of unpredictability as a human in a human zoo, I think.
I would say probably my approach would be different. I would eventually just try to block out the fact that there were aliens watching me and just try to live sort of a self-sufficient existence. But maybe at the same time, you would need that. I'd have you, of course.
Sure, I'm sure they could figure out one-way glass as well, so you
Yeah.
don't see them looking at you and stuff.
Although
Again,
that
they
might-
let you
That
design.
might creep me out a little bit.
That's true, but they let you design your own exhibit, so whatever you need to feel comfortable, I'm sure these aliens would accommodate.
Yeah.
Anything else, or you tapped out?
I think that's about it.
I didn't hear what you're wearing in your zoo.
Oh, I think I probably would be losing the shirt pretty early.
Shirtless.
On. Yeah,
So shirtless, pair of
but
shorts,
yeah,
something like that.
Some sort of. I mean, I guess it'd probably get withered down to a loincloth at some point.
Yeah, I was wondering.
That's what
Yeah.
humans in sort of the state of wild seem
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
with typically. So.
According to Tarzan and
Yeah.
Mowgli.
Yeah.
Well, loincloth, something certainly to consider.
bit of modesty.
Yeah, a bit of modesty. A little better than a t-shirt and boxers, I suppose. Please subscribe, comment, and leave a rating. Send questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer, Will Slade, and we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers Podcast. Take care, buddy.
Buddy, you